we've had a very divisive relationship with the meat industry, and they've got huge lobbying power with the government.
Right.
You look at India, it's a big vegan, vegetarian economy, and yet there's some pretty significant nutritional deficiencies. I'll explain our proteins first, and then I'll say, well, why on earth are we talking about Legos in reference to our protein portfolios?
Welcome to Plant-Based on Fire, the podcast that ignites your passion for plant-based businesses. Real Men Eat Plants is proud to host this show, where we shine a spotlight on the latest and greatest plant-based companies making waves in the industry. From startups to established brands, we'll explore what sets these businesses apart, what challenges they've faced, and what their vision for a more sustainable and ethical food future looks like. So if you're hungry for some fresh insights, inspiring stories, and a healthy dose of entrepreneurial spirit, then join us on Plant-Based on Fire, brought to you by Real Men Eat Plants.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Plant-Based on Fire, where we talk about plant-based businesses and their inspiring stories to thrive in our industry. I am your host, Brian, and the best way that you can honestly support this podcast is to click that subscribe button down below. We're closing in on almost 50 episodes of this show, and we really need more subscribers. So help us out, subscribe, and continue to like and share these videos with all of your other plant-based friends out there. And joining us today is Kristi, I'm going to say it wrong, Riordan. She is the co-founder and CEO at HarvestB. It's an Australian B2B food technology company developing and manufacturing novel proteins. Welcome to the show, Kristi. How did I do on that last name?
Riordan. So you're very, very close. It's a good old
Very
Irish
close.
name, but thanks. It's good to be here,
Very
Brian.
nice. Yeah, I appreciate you jumping in and hanging out with us. Now, you don't have the Australian accent, so tell us a little bit about your journey and what motivated you to co-found sort of HarvestB and how you got to be in Australia.
Yeah. Well, it's always really nice to connect with somebody who has an American accent. I am a native American and spent the vast majority of my life there. I just moved here 5 years ago, so I'm new to being Australian. But I've actually been working in venture-backed businesses for about 20 years and have always been the business builder, working alongside technical people. I love developing new categories, especially when there's an opportunity to create, I think, a greater good for society. I actually moved to Australia nearly 5 years ago after I'd sold my last company, and I was the beneficiary of getting a global talent visa. This is a program that Australia launched to actually recruit people into the country who had experience with building businesses globally, wanted to have that talent here locally to identify different opportunities where there was a competitive strategic advantage for Australia, and bring the talented who could help build the early days of those businesses, but then also take them globally as well. And it was a bit of an opportunity for me to have a fresh start in thinking about, well, what's the next company that I want to build? And I was really, this would have been 2019. I was really motivated by working on sustainability. And I thought I wanted to find an area where I could put my skills to use in that field. But I also wanted to think about, where did Australia have a unique advantage that we could maybe exploit in doing that? And there's just this incredibly rich heritage of agriculture here. Mm-hmm. There's one of the greatest sources of plant protein anywhere in the world, and really high quality protein as well. The biosecurity here in Australia is second to none from a global perspective. So I started thinking a lot about plant protein because of that, because if you no doubt have looked at, and your listeners have looked at Project Drawdown, and you know that the number one thing is reducing food waste, but number two is having a plant-rich diet. So we know it's an incredibly important way of improving the sustainability of our planet. So I started looking around and thinking, well, what was the opportunity? At this point in time, this was 2019, Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods had been around for quite some time and were making a lot of noise publicly. Mm-hmm. They were gaining a lot of traction with consumers. But I started noticing there were a lot of other brands as well. But there was this real lack of a supply chain of the ingredients to be used to be able to create the right kinds of products that people want to eat. And I've spent so much time in new category building that one of the things I thought about a lot is in software, which I have spent a lot of my time in software as well. There's this phrase of a winner take all. You look at companies like Uber, Airbnb, Google. We could name them all day long, where you expect as an investor to have a winner take all. So you want to be first to market and be as big as possible. But I really felt like food wasn't like that. Food was a very different market. And because we've got so many different cultural patterns with food, and food is emotional as much as it is rational, that we really need a lot of players in this space coming up with so many different types of applications and cuisines and inspiring people and giving people confidence on how to cook and engage at restaurants with plant-rich diets. So it occurred to me that there was probably an opportunity to really go into the supply chain and think about a B2B solution where we were creating a technology, a protein ingredient that would allow people to have highly affordable, highly nutritious, and highly performing plant protein diets. And so that's really what we focused on. And the first biggest problem was really around texture. And I think that's something that we hear over and over and over again, is that texture is really difficult to achieve. So that was one of the first problems that we focused on, was really thinking about how we could create a better texture solution. So we have less ingredients in the finished application, and it's also easier to handle through the supply chain.
That's awesome. And it's so interesting too, because I know, I'm on year 14 of this journey and my plant-based life. And it's that question around when I do, accidentally no, there's no bacon in this black bean soup or whatever. And they don't realize that there is. You hit that texture and you're like, oh, that definitely is meat on that front. But so, yeah, I absolutely love it and I feel like, that planning piece of it is so key to helping figure out where is this going to go with the future of food. And when I was looking at your website, preparing for this interview today, it was that question around you, to me, I grew up with Legos, and I feel like you're really this building block. You know what I mean? So for those that don't know HarvestB and your mission and stuff, can you just elaborate on what are you developing and manufacturing in the novel protein space?
Yeah, it's a great point. And I love the fact that you brought up Legos and made that connection. We talk about it a lot. So I'll explain our proteins first, and then I'll say, well, why on earth are we talking about Legos in reference to our protein portfolio? So we manufacture a wide variety of different proteins. We probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 different proteins that are available for our customers. And those proteins come with, some are single protein, some are two proteins blended together. And we'll do that because it allows us to achieve a particular textural outcome. But sometimes it also allows us to achieve a nutritional outcome as well, which is very, very important. And of course, we always think about affordability and the cost component as well. But so the first thing is we think about the proteins that are coming together. The second thing is we think about the size and the shape. Of course, the texture, all of those things affect the texture. The proteins that are going into it will affect the texture that's possible to achieve. The shape and the size of it will affect the texture that we're trying to achieve. So our portfolio actually has a wide variety of things that would be similar to a shredded chicken, or similar to, in Australia, we say a beef mince. And in the US, we'd say a ground beef. This is my 5 years into translating. You think it's all English, but it's actually different. And then we've also got whole pieces. And this is actually where a lot of our innovation has been, in creating whole pieces of meat, it'd be a cubed beef in the United States. It'd be a diced beef here in Australia. And then we also have different species types. So we have chicken, pork, beef, and lamb. But that portfolio allows us to provide these Legos, as you suggested a moment ago, Brian, into whether it be institutional chefs or to home cooks. And it allows them to put it into a healthy everyday meal. Allow them to build it up in the way in which they want. Our proteins are also designed to be really neutral in flavor. So they don't have to be masked, which is another way why we see a lot of additional ingredients on many of the products that are in market today because they're actually masking undesirable plant protein flavors when you're having it in that meal. So we create a neutral flavor. And then our proteins are actually, they come shelf stable. So they're a little bit like pasta. If you think about a pasta, we brine it when we're ready to use it. And that gives us an interesting opportunity because if you want to infuse it with a flavor system, so let's say you take our shredded chicken style protein. If you want to infuse it with a chicken flavor, that's great, but you actually don't have to. And so many of our fans are actually professional athletes, and they love the ability to just introduce these little Lego building blocks of protein into their meals and put it with whatever sauce or creation they might want to have. I was making enchiladas the other night with my kids. So I threw the chicken shred just dry into the enchilada, and then it absorbs through that sauce. And then it's like shredded chicken when it comes out and you're eating it, but it's extremely clean. Our proteins only have the plant derivatives. There's no other additive in the majority of our plant proteins. Sometimes we have a coloring if we're moving something into a beef or a lamb style. But that's essentially what the protein portfolio is. And it's really designed to be affordable, highly nutritious, and easy to cook with for everyday healthy meals, which kind of takes us in, I think, a bit of a step change of what we wanted to do, of moving from the first generation of products, which were really, the schnitzels, the chicken nuggets, the beef burgers, the sausages, all of which are tasty and wonderful indulgences. But I think there is a desire to have this high protein addition into more healthy everyday meals that we want to cook at home and in the restaurants as well.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. And it's funny, you made me go back. I actually worked for Vodafone way back when in England, and I could not find in the grocery store garbage bags. I just couldn't find them anywhere because in England they call them bin liners. So I don't know what they call them in Australia, but the bin liners are out there. So yeah, so you do have to figure out your new language there right. For sure. But it's very similar to like going into the plant-based life. I mean, you have to learn about nutritional yeast. You have to learn about all these alternative ways to get some of the flavors and textures that maybe you crave from your meat eating days on that front. It's interesting. Like, I commend everybody that's exploring the protein manufacturing and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. How do you feel that HarvestB approaches this and makes it unique or differentiates itself in the plant-based world a little bit?
So the first thing is that we are agnostic to what protein we use, and we actually have a provisional patent on combining legumes. So all of the beans, the peas, the pulses, all of those things with cereals. So that's things like your wheats, and we find that combining those two families of proteins together offers us a couple of really important advantages. One is the functional advantage. So we will look at the protein in terms of how we can achieve that finished texture that we want to have based on the way that protein is going to be used. So if we're trying to create a cubed piece of beef, for example, that's very different than a shredded, more delicate chicken style product. Or even if we want to create a chicken breast or a chicken thigh, those are different kinds of textures. So what we've done in our process is really focus in on how can we bring those protein types in, blending them together so that we can achieve that textural outcome for the specific application we want to have. But we also think very deeply about nutrition. Different proteins have different nutritional benefits and can actually oftentimes complement each other, as much as I think they can actually complement animal protein as well. But in blending them together, it allows us to formulate and achieve some really, I think, interesting opportunities in the finished product, where you've got people who love to eat meat. That's just sort of a reality of our society. Yeah. And I think if we can create a product where we can give people a more affordable and a more nutritious version of that, but in a very similar format to the way they like to eat with it, that's such a great opportunity. And then sustainability is our benefit of it.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I hope that we can end some of the meat subsidies that are around the globe. But driving down that cost, and it's healthier for you and it's going to save the planet. So like all roads lead to that for sure.
All right, if you've ever wanted to show off your plant-based lifestyle and do it in style, here's your chance. We have some of the most amazing t-shirts, hats, accessories, coffee mugs, and more at shop.realmeneatplants.com. We have statement t-shirts that will bring a smile to everyone's face. I love the I want tofu tonight tee. Plus, we have podcast tees, Real Women Eat Plants gear, Real Kids Eat Plants, and Real People Eat Plants, just in case men, women, and kids didn't cover it all. Yeah, we love you and love that you want to show off that healthy lifestyle of yours. Again, check out our high-quality gear at shop.realmeneatplants.com and enjoy.
You've got a ton of experience in these highly regulated industries. How do you navigate some of the challenges of being in the food technology sector?
I think when you're in a regulated space, you have to balance the approach that you're taking. In the tech world and in the startup world, there's oftentimes a bit of a cavalier attitude towards regulation. So, if you look at, we could name any number of companies, but Uber, right, is probably a prime example that comes to mind of where they just flaunted regulations. It was a part of their business strategy and their go-to-market strategy and opening up new markets. When you're in a highly regulated field, and especially when you're in a field like food, you just have to operate differently. You have to have a different kind of attitude than some of the cowboy type styles that many people would oftentimes use in venture-backed businesses. It doesn't mean you can't be aggressive with your ambition, with your growth, with your pathways to market. But I think you just have to take care in how there are certain things that are just non-negotiables, right? Like your food safety standards and things of that nature. But I think there's also, in a regulated space, when you're building, so that's just the safety side of the house. But I think then there's the novel category that's being developed, that's pushing into territory in a regulated environment. And that always causes challenges. So the issue is the regulations don't really address necessarily what it is that you're trying to do. Whether it's the labeling laws that we've seen, certainly a lot of this in the United States, we've seen it in Australia, it's happening around the world. You've got cell egg in Italy where it's being banned. So you just have to actually have a government-oriented approach as well. And you actually have to invest in that. It's hard as an early stage startup to think about that, where you're trying to get your product developed, you're trying to get your product to market, you're trying to get customers. If you've got manufacturing, you're actually trying to get the line to run appropriately. But you actually have to develop those relationships as well. And so we've been really fortunate here in Australia in that it is a smaller market. One of the advantages is that we can actually develop relationships into government, but it's having active conversations around it. And it's also, I think, something in this space in particular that is probably at a moment of a step change is we've had a very divisive relationship with the meat industry. And they do, as you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, they've got huge lobbying power with the government. Mm-hmm. So that's a really tricky path to walk down, is how do we consider our relationship with that industry? And because the politicians who are setting the regulations are having very active conversations with them. So it's something that you have to hold all of that inside your head and think about how you will have those relationships. And here in Australia, one thing that we think about a lot is that we're developing an advanced manufacturing industry. And that's actually really, really important right now. Sovereign manufacturing is something that the United States has done a lot of work on trying to bring back with the IRA. And it's something that Australia has done. And so there's a great deal of interest in finding ways to do additional value-added capabilities that are domestic and sovereign. So you just have to find the way to build the relationships and be thoughtful about it and more mature, maybe a little bit less cowboy on that side of the house.
Yeah, I commend your efforts there. I mean, it's definitely finding that balancing act for sure. But I do see even Tyson and some of the bigger brands, figuring out ways to introduce the plant-based options into it. So I'm excited to see us hopefully all come together and find that balance for sure.
I know. I was just Just a quick point on that before you move
Hmm.
on. I actually think what's really interesting about the big animal companies is they have made a number of attempts to get into the space. Many attempts,
Hmm.
actually. They probably started maybe even 10 years ago, but certainly 5 years ago. But I think there's sort of there's a classic big company challenge of
Yeah.
being innovative. And there's also a branding challenge as well, because when you've got, I've seen Tyson did some things recently in the United States, and
Hmm.
they were trying to do both on their animal protein products as well as on plant-based products, and they've been accused of greenwashing. And so
Hmm.
they've got to be really, really careful that what they're doing is very authentic. And they've also got to be thoughtful on how they actually try to drive innovation. And this is where I think there's an opportunity for partnership to develop in the next wave of growth in plant protein, is partnering with startups who have the authenticity in the brand, who have the innovation muscle that is developed
Yeah.
and capable. And maybe there's going to be some different ways that things will be brought to market and give us that kind of scale that we can actually probably achieve through those companies.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do a lot of mentoring. So I'm, as a fractional chief technology officer, I do quite a bit of mentoring in the technology space. And I was just speaking with an Internet of Things ag tech company
Mm.
yesterday, mentoring them on some ways to go after that market and initiative. And it all comes back to, like, how do we dance with the big players? How do we, not offend one, but still build the partnership with the other, and go down that path? And then that quickly dovetailed into another conversation around investment. We're growing, we have some income. Should we take on some investment to go faster? And then we'll be tied to the powers that be that want their dividends and stuff. So there's this balancing act between the two of them for sure. And I think you're tackling a monstrous problem, because it takes a tremendous amount of capital to create a food group, an alternative protein on that front. But I know you've got a big investment firm, W23, involved and stuff like that. So how has support from investors and partnerships shaped some of your trajectory at HarvestB?
So we've got a number of different investors that have different roles that they have played for us. So you mentioned W23. This is the venture arm of the largest grocer here in Australia, which is called Woolworths. This would be the equivalent of Kroger, probably in the United
Hmm.
States. They've been really fantastic. They were actually, I think, probably our first check-in. And that was really important because it provided a lot of credibility and a signal to the market of saying,
Yeah.
this is someone who understands food. This is someone who recognizes there's some supply chain challenges, because they, of course, they're buying from all of the brands, globally. They've got a lot of products that they were bringing into Australia, and so the fact that they recognize the problem that we were setting out to solve, I think, was a very, very strong signal into the market. We also have an investor called Mandalay Ventures. This is a dedicated agri-food investment fund. That one has been different or interesting for different reasons, because they're focused on the entire agriculture supply chain. They've also recognized some of the structural problems that we are tackling, and they've been really helpful in making connections for us across the supply chain. We have another investor called Aura Impact, or Aura Ventures, and they have a lot of relationships into Asia. So they've been incredibly helpful in opening their Rolodex and in helping us make connections in Asia as well. So I think, choosing your investors, you certainly want to have an alignment on your vision, on your timing, as you said, because that can definitely get misaligned with investors. And this category requires work still to figure out how is it going to scale. I think we've seen through a lot of different data points that we had an incredible amount of growth over the last 15 years, but what does the next 10 years look like? What does the next 5 years look like? So we're going through a little bit of an iteration and a step change on what the product is to move from early adopters into the mainstream. And so that takes some time to work those things through. But each of those investors, I think, has really brought us some important value into growing the business.
That is awesome. Yeah, some great insights there on when and and some of the ones that are in this space. I guess what is the what is I guess the question that's popping in my head is really the localness of it, right? Like, I feel like we have to figure out, how do we bring the food creation closer to the big cities in some way, shape, or form? You know, us raising cattle in the Amazon and shipping them all the way up to North America is not sustainable long term in many, many ways on that front. So I was going to ask you that question of, like, where do you see the future of plant-based protein, as it's heading? But I also am curious, like, you're obviously servicing Australia and probably Southeast Asia with your proteins. Do you plan to have global domination on the radar in 10 years, or will you be creating manufacturing once you've reached an inflection point here in America?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the things that I was shocked by when I was in the early stages back in 2019 of doing market research and trying to understand the problem, really trying to articulate the problem more, I was shocked to find that plant proteins are sometimes shipped around the world 4 times, where you might grow the plant somewhere. For Australia, for example, we'd ship it over to somewhere in Europe. It would be refined and value added into something that can actually be used to make a meat. It would come back to Australia. A brand here might make it into a finished food, and then they would sell that finished food over to grocers in the UK. And I thought, this is a category that's founded on sustainability. This is completely crazy. I just couldn't believe it was happening. So, yes, I have thought about that a lot. And our long-term vision, something that it'll take time to get there, but we have oftentimes thought that our current pilot facility, so this isn't a large-scale facility, it's a pilot facility that we've started with, this can eventually become a dedicated R&D facility. So it has the ability to, it's small enough that we can do R&D really, really effectively on it. It's been one of our secret advantages in how we've been able to build our product portfolio as quickly as we could. But it also is large enough to run commercial production. Eventually, our thinking is that this may be a full-time R&D facility, because we see a world in which we're using local proteins, the protein sources that are available in a particular market, the manufacturing capabilities that are available in that local market. And those are then more suitable to that local market as well. So you're thinking about the flavors that are coming from those proteins in that local market. You're thinking about the texture creation that you want to make for that local market. I mean, one of the mistakes that, I think the big original two made in pushing into Asia was taking, this is a very American thing, so I feel like I can say this as an American, that we take what works really well in America, which is an enormous market, and we push it out globally as largely the same kind of product. We've now seen local brands across Asia that have emerged with completely different form factors, different flavors, different packaging and marketing that connect with that local consumer. So I think that's something from a product development perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, that we should lean into. And in 10 years' time, I hope that it's not just soy, wheat, pea that we're talking about as the primary sources, but I hope that it's a variety. And we might have some really important base proteins, but I think there will be a much wider variety of proteins that are utilized, that are sourced as much as possible from that local region, created to a texture and a form factor that's suitable for the kinds of food that are eaten. And ideally, you take a look at India, for example. Ideally, we're also formulating for the nutritional deficiencies that exist in that market as well. Right. You look at India, it's a big vegan, vegetarian economy, and yet there's some pretty significant nutritional deficiencies. And I think we can achieve that. So I think that's the vision of where we go, but it will take time. It takes R&D time to get there. It takes go-to-market strategies to get there, and it takes infrastructure to get there as well.
Yeah. I mean, very, very well said. I support that initiative, and it is great to hear you've got this amazing secret base of operations for the research side of it. You've been on your entrepreneurial journey numerous times now. So for the people that are just wanting to get into the plant-based sector, do you have some key lessons, or what have you learned that really stuck in your mind as the most important thing as a entrepreneur in general, but more specifically in this plant-based space that we're heading into?
I think know your drivers. It's something that I've always talked to people on my team about throughout my career, certainly the last 10 years of my career, is there's nothing more powerful than understanding your own why.
Hmm.
And sometimes your why is about making money. Sometimes your why is about saving the planet. But you need to be honest with yourself about the reasons, what's going to get you out of bed every day, because building a business is hard. Being an entrepreneur is
Yeah.
really hard. Um, and this is a space that's still being developed, established. It's transforming itself. It can be very divisive. There's people. I mean, I'm constantly in conversations or watching LinkedIn threads where people get very angry about this space. People feel really
Yes.
strong about animal meat. People feel really strong about plant protein. So you've got to have the right motivations to get into it. So just find your why, understand your why. And then if this is a space that's really for you, that's great, because we need a lot more people in a lot of different kinds of roles that are contributing. And then I think the question is, think about transferable skills. I've got a woman who's actually going to be joining our company in a business development role, but she comes out of the real estate industry. She was actually in the Philippines for many, many years and worked in marketing and business development in a wide variety of different roles. She has an absolute passion for food and for health. And she
Hmm.
is so excited to be able to combine business development from her professional background alongside her personal passions around food and health and plant protein. So, finding those ways in which to take transferable skills where you might not have done anything in this industry or maybe not even been in the food industry, but there's a lot of skills that can transfer in and really benefit this category. So, know your why and think about your transferable skills.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody goes back to Simon Sinek on the definitely know your why, because
Yeah.
it is most businesses fail within those first 5 years. So you've got to make sure as you're going through that valley of despair at year 2 and 3 that you've got a plan to see through the other side. So
That's right.
yeah, I really, really love that. This has been an amazing conversation on that. I feel like we could keep unpacking this for a while more. So I'd love to have you back on the show whenever you're launching a new product or something. But how can all of our listeners help support you? I don't think you're shipping to the United States quite yet, but we
We
hope
are.
you get there.
We
You
are
are. Oh, you
actually.
are. So
We
so
we
how do tell us, how do we get in touch? How can the
yeah,
community support you?
yeah. This might actually be our official announcement, which I wasn't planning on, but we as of I think the last 2 business days, we are now live with products on both Walmart and Kroger. So for anyone who's interested in, yes, it's very exciting. We're very excited. So although we mostly sell all of our proteins into institutional food service and other food manufacturers, we have a range of consumer proteins that are made for at-home use. In particular, people who love to do meal prepping. So high fitness enthusiasts, high health, although I'm sure there's many people in your audience who would be interested in this. So we've taken our proteins, we've put them into, oh boy, it's 1 kilo packs. I think that's about 2.2 pounds
Yep.
is what it makes. So it's shelf stable. It comes in a kit that has our measured protein in there alongside a flavor sachet, a flavor pack. And when you're ready to cook it, you can just put water in with the flavor sachet, and then you cook it up just like a regular protein. So we've got a wide variety. We've got that chicken style shred I was talking about. We've got a cubed beef, a cubed dice, a cubed chicken, and a chicken strip. So 5 things to choose from.
I love it. Well, I will definitely be checking that out. So how do they get in touch with you? What are the best ways? What's your website? And you said Walmart and Kroger, right?
Yes,
Online?
Walmart. Yes, Walmart and Kroger. So our business to business website is HarvestB.io. But the brand that we have launched under the consumer, which is on Kroger and on Walmart, is Be Strong. So if you're looking for Be Strong products, it's bestrong.life
All
to
right.
have a stronger life.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on the product launches here. I look forward to tasting them and checking them out here soon. And I'll maybe try and put a little TikTok video out there tasting that and stuff. But
That'd be amazing.
it's been great, Kristi, talking with you. We really appreciate your time on the show today.
Thanks, Brian. Great to be here.
That is all the time we have for this episode of Plant Based on Fire. Again, Kristi, it's been a pleasure joining us. Thank you for joining us, and pleasure talking, sharing your insights and experiences with our community. Until next time, everybody, keep that fire burning.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Plant Based on Fire. We hope you enjoyed learning about the innovative plant-based businesses we featured today and got inspired to support them on their journey. Remember, plant-based eating isn't just a trend. It's a way of life that benefits your health, the environment, and animals. By choosing plant-based foods, you're making a positive impact on the world and helping to create a better and more compassionate future. If you want to join the Real Men Eat Plants community and get even more resources to help you go and stay plant-based, check out our blog, podcasts, and 30-day challenge at realmeneatplants.com. Thank you for tuning in to Plant Based on Fire, brought to you by Real Men Eat Plants. Head over to Apple Podcast and give us a review, and let us know what you think of this episode. Don't forget to tag us at Plant Based on Fire when you share this episode in your preferred social media. Wish to be a guest? We need to know about your plant-based business. Email us at pbof@realmeneatplants.com. We love hearing from our listeners. Thank you to our guests and to you, our listeners, for your support, and see you next time.